Welcome back to the show, y'all. Welcome back to the show. It is 10:06 a.m. here on the East Coast, and it is 6/3/2026. It is a beautiful June morning. It is 69 degrees outside right now. It is beautiful outside right now, y'all. Make sure once y'all get done watching the show, make sure y'all get outside and enjoy the weather, y'all. Other than that, sorry about earlier. For some reason we're having technical difficulties where it's showing ads. I'm not for sure why, but we shouldn't be having ads. I don't know why we're having ads, but we are. But anyways, other than that, if you're just now joining in, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and follow. That way we can get pushed out more and we don't get stopped by the algorithm. But anyways, further ado, let's get back to what we was doing earlier.
Patriot missile defense systems are even more limited. They're designed for aircraft and short-range missiles. They were never built to stop intercontinental nuclear warheads. They exist in the hundreds, but they are irrelevant against strategic nuclear strikes. Aegis missile defense systems use SM-3 interceptors. Each SM-3 interceptor costs between $10 and $25 million. They're effective mainly over oceans against limited ballistic threats. Even globally, there are only a few hundred SM-3 interceptors available. That number is insignificant compared to the thousands of nuclear warheads in existence. Now, the math becomes fatal. Defense launches one interceptor per target. Offense launches missiles, warheads, decoys, debris, and electronic countermeasures. Defense must be perfect. Offense needs one warhead to get through. Speed makes this imbalance worse. Ballistic warheads travel at over 20,000 kilometers per hour. From detection to impact, minutes, sometimes less. There is no evacuation, no citywide sheltering, no second chance. Missile defense does not get retries. By the time confirmation arrives, the outcome is already locked in by physics. Then come decoys, the system killers. Modern nuclear missiles deploy lightweight decoys designed to look identical to real warheads. Radar cannot tell the difference. Infrared sensors cannot tell the difference. Missile defense must guess. The attacker already knows. Defense works with probability. Offense works with certainty. No software upgrade fixes that. Even when missile defense works, the city's not safe. If interception happens too low or too late, radioactive debris still spreads. Electromagnetic pulse effects can still disable power grids across hundreds of kilometers. Communications fail. Hospitals lose power. Water systems stop. An interception over a city can still cripple it. Missile defense can change how destruction happens. It cannot guarantee that destruction doesn't happen. Now consider priorities. Missile defense coverage is limited by cost and physics. You cannot defend everything. So planners defend what matters strategically. Missile silos, air bases, submarine ports, command bunkers. Cities do not decide the outcome of nuclear war. From a strategic standpoint, defending them is inefficient. That decision was made during the Cold War. It still defines defense planning today. Cities are not forgotten, they're accepted losses. Cities are not defended, they're calculated. Now, imagine the aftermath. One 300-kiloton nuclear warhead detonates over a major city. The explosion lasts seconds. The consequences last decades. Power grids collapse instantly, not for hours, but for months. Water treatment fails. Fuel distribution stops. Food supply chains collapse within days. Hospitals are destroyed or overwhelmed. Radiation zones block rescue. Survivors are isolated. Within days, secondary effects kill more people than the blast itself. Firestorms burn uncontrolled. Disease spreads. Social order fractures. Missile defense does not prevent this. At best, it slightly changes where destruction falls. And the most dangerous effect isn't physical, it's psychological. Once one nuclear weapon gets through, every assumption collapses. Escalation becomes automatic. Retaliation becomes mandatory. Restraint disappears. The first city is not the end, it's the trigger. 3:27 a.m., a radar operator at Thule Air Force Base in Greenland watches red blips appear along the Arctic corridor, the classic route for Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles. Within seconds, the dots multiply: 5, 20, 50. Those dots are not blips, but boosters climbing through the cold sky. The operator radios.
Command, this isn't a drill. We have confirmed launches.
Russia's modern road-mobile RS-24 Yars and its aging but heavy R-30M family, the SS-18 Satan lineage, are designed to get multiple warheads airborne fast. The RS-24 is a solid-fuel, MIRV-capable ICBM deployed in both silo and mobile launchers. Its practical range covers intercontinental targets, and a single missile can carry several independently targetable re-entry vehicles, a way to put multiple high-yield strikes in the air from one launcher. The R-36M variant.
Kayak told me hotel prices just dropped. Now we can finally stop scrolling for travel hacks.
Hey, free phones.
Missile submarines can release RM-56 Bulava SLBMs. Bulava is designed to carry multiple warheads with penetration aids and is meant to be a concealed, survivable leg of the triad. Launches from submarines shorten warning times because they can be fired from relative proximity to coasts. On the American and NATO side, the LGM-30 Minuteman III ICBM force and the sea-based UGM-133 Trident II D5 form the analogous response options. Minuteman flight times to Eurasian targets are typically in the 25 to 35 minute band. Trident D5 flight times depend on launch position, but can be under 15 to 30 minutes for closer arcs. At roughly 8:03 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time, the first large detonations occur. These are the prompt high-yield strikes intended to decapitate command, destroy military nodes, and vaporize population centers. An 800-kiloton atmosphere burst over a capital produces a white flash visible hundreds of kilometers away. A blast that vaporizes structures at ground zero and ignites firestorms for miles beyond. Detonations at this stage target both counterforce and countervalue locations. Russia's heavy R-36M variants, or the RS-24 MIRV packages, can be loaded for multiple hard targets. U.S. counterforce options would include precisely targeted Trident D5 warheads or Minuteman III re-entry vehicles. Strategic bombers like the B-2 and B-52 carrying modern B-61 family weapons, the B-61-12 being a guided variable yield design, add flexibility in delivery and yield selection, though airborne bombers can only meaningfully contribute if they are already aloft or near the target. At the 20-minute mark, American Strategic Command, after confirming multiple detonations, orders retaliation. U.S. Trident II D5 missiles fired from Ohio-class submarines can place accurate MIRV or single warhead re-entry vehicles on Moscow or strategic military targets with flight times that, depending on launch points, can be under 30 minutes. The land leg, Minuteman III, is measured for quick response, and the airborne leg, B-2s and B-52s, offer variable yield options via B-61 family bombs. That combination gives the U.S. multiple delivery modes, but it also guarantees a massive count of warheads aloft in minutes. On the Russian side, hypersonic boost glide vehicles, such as Avangard, reported to maneuver at extremely high speeds during re-entry, reduce interception windows, and complicate tracking. Their presence compresses decision times and increases the temptation for launch-on-warning postures. Modern interceptors can engage some fraction of warheads or their decoys, but MIRVs and penetration aids are intentionally designed to overwhelm defenses. The result? The retaliation wave is almost certain to land in dozens or hundreds of places within the next 10 minutes. By the half-hour mark, the character of the crisis changes from targeting to systemic collapse. Hundreds of detonations have already occurred. EMP from high-altitude bursts and the sheer density of explosions create a cascade of cascading failures. Power grids trip under surges and failures. Satellites are degraded by debris and radiation. GPS accuracy collapses in many regions, and civil telecommunications fail. The skies streak with re-entry vehicles. The upper air glows red with intense thermal radiation and fireballs. All of this produces immense amounts of black carbon and dust that begin their ascent toward the stratosphere. As detonations accumulate and fires rage, enormous quantities of soot and vaporized material are lofted into the stratosphere. The dynamics are physical and direct. Firestorms generated by urban conflagrations inject black carbon thousands of meters high. Once in the stratosphere, that soot is not readily washed out by rain and instead spreads globally, reducing incoming solar radiation. At the same time, fallout from surface and low-altitude detonations sends radioactive isotopes like cesium-137, strontium-90, and plutonium particulates across continents. These isotopes have long half-lives that contaminate land and water and create long-term health hazards. Ocean launches and detonations pollute marine systems as radioactive material washes into currents and bioaccumulates in food chains. The combined climate and radiological effects ensure that even areas not directly hit by a warhead face collapse of food production, water safety, and public health infrastructure within weeks to months. An hour after the first launch, weapon counts and flight times explain the grim totals. Hundreds to thousands of re-entry vehicles have detonated across the northern hemisphere and beyond. Land, sea, and air infrastructure lie in ruins. Satellites essential to modern logistics are damaged or destroyed, and electromagnetic disruption has taken down banking, transport, and emergency communications. Many delivery modes, many warheads, multiple launch arcs, short flight times, and penetration aids all conspire to make the first hour irreversible. Beyond this point, global casualty counts are in the hundreds of millions. Infrastructure is largely destroyed, and the first physical steps of nuclear winter are underway. The planet's climate system and biosphere have already been pushed onto a path that will cause famine, disease, and ecosystem collapse. The technical architecture that kept superfighting states in mutually assured destruction has now executed its grim logic. Months later, the environmental, radiological, and systemic damage begun in that first hour will have cascaded into planetary-scale disruptions. Sunlight will remain reduced where soot is thickest. Harvests will fail. Potable water will be scarce. And biological systems, from insects to crops to fish populations, will be devastated. That was only the opening act. What happens next could change the fate of billions. One moment, the world is scrolling through short videos and social media. The next, the sky glows white. That's how a global war could begin. Not with a declaration, not with negotiations breaking down, but with a sudden chain reaction that no one can stop. Before anyone truly understands what happened, tens of millions of lives could already be at risk. But who would start it? What weapons would be unleashed? And what would the first hour, first week, and first year actually look like? It begins at 3:17 UTC. Satellites detect 3 missile launches from different regions of the planet. One from Kaliningrad, one from the Barents Sea, and one from central Iran. NORAD thinks it's a glitch, until radar confirms the truth. The first missile is a Russian Iskander-M ballistic missile, capable of carrying a low-yield nuclear payload with a flight time so short it can strike before anyone can respond. The second is a Caliber-M cruise missile, stealthy, low-flying, nearly invisible to radar. The third is a Fateh 110 missile launched toward a U.S. base in the Middle East. Suddenly, the world's most advanced warning systems erupt with red alerts while millions sleep, unaware that the nightmare of global war has already begun. There are 3 highly realistic ignition points for a modern global conflict, each based on real-world military movements already observed. The first is a Russia versus NATO confrontation. If Moscow faced internal instability or catastrophic battle losses, it might conduct a so-called limited strike on a NATO supply hub, using a 5 to 10 kiloton tactical nuclear weapon. This strike would be intended to shock NATO into backing down. Instead, it would likely trigger Article 5 and unleash a cycle of retaliation impossible to stop. The second spark lies in an escalating US-China confrontation. A sudden invasion of Taiwan would unleash DF-17 hypersonic gliders moving at Mach 10, DF-26 ballistic Guam killer missiles, Type O-55 destroyers, and J-20 stealth fighters. The United States would respond with carrier strike groups, Tomahawks, stealth aircraft, and cyber countermeasures. Russia could quietly back China. NATO would back the US. The conflict could expand from the Taiwan Strait to the South China Sea, then to Europe, and finally across the world. The third trigger is a Middle Eastern chain reaction. Israel might strike Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran could retaliate with Shahab-3 ballistic missiles and waves of drones against US bases in the Gulf. The US would intervene in Israel's defense. Russia might provide diplomatic or air defense support to Iran. China might align with Russia to preserve strategic partnerships. 3 separate wars would merge into one global conflict. Within the first hour of the war, thousands of military systems across the world activate. Russia puts its perimeter semi-automatic retaliatory system on high alert. Over 600 long-range missiles streak across the sky in the first 60 minutes. Then, the first nuclear detonation occurs. A blinding flash erupts over the Baltic Sea. Sensors confirm a tactical nuclear explosion in the 5 to 10 kiloton range. No one knows if it was a deliberate strike, a malfunction, or an intercepted warhead. NATO has 3 minutes to decide whether to retaliate. The world freezes, and this is only the beginning. By the second hour, more mushroom clouds appear. Some are tactical low-yield detonations. Others are far larger. New York, Moscow, Beijing, London, and Paris could be hit with strategic warheads measuring hundreds of kilotons each, vaporizing city centers in seconds. Firestorms rip outward, igniting suburbs and forests. Fallout clouds travel with the wind, poisoning areas untouched by direct strikes. Global communications falter as EMP waves ripple through satellites and digital
New Eden, a universe brimming with possibility and rife with adventure. Only the most intrepid capsuleers can conquer its many wonders. Do you have what it takes to become one with the machine? To explore the far reaches of space, carving out a name for yourself among the stars. To become a titan of industry, amassing wealth, power, and prestige as you rise above your rivals. Or to prove your worth in combat, cementing new alliances and vanquishing your foes on your path to glory. For the rare few, immortality awaits.
Cover. The first hints of nuclear winter begin. By the end of the week, tens of millions have died. Societies unravel. Survival becomes local. Fear becomes universal. The first month marks the point where strategic nuclear exchange becomes unavoidable. A satellite malfunction might be mistaken for an ICBM. A radar shadow might be seen as a launch. The United States could launch dozens of Minuteman III ICBMs, each with 300 to 475 kiloton warheads. Ohio-class submarines could unleash waves of Trident II D5 SLBMs, each with up to 8 475 kiloton warheads. Russia could respond with RS-24 Yars missiles or Sarmat heavy missiles carrying 10 to 15 warheads of 750 kilotons each. Within 45 minutes, over 1,200 nuclear warheads could detonate across the planet, killing hundreds of millions instantly. As months pass, smoke and soot from burning megacities rise into the upper atmosphere. Sunlight declines sharply. Temperatures drop by 2 to 5 degrees Celsius. Global crops fail. Oceans acidify. Famine spreads. Billions face starvation. Civilization collapses. Major cities become abandoned ruins. Governments survive only in hardened bunkers. Borders dissolve. The world map becomes meaningless. Areas with water, moderate radiation, and arable land remain habitable, but barely. North America survives in scattered pockets. Europe is largely devastated. Large parts of Russia remain irradiated, but partially intact. China preserves some state control. The Middle East collapses under combined fallout and infrastructure loss. Africa and South America, less directly targeted, suffer famine and mass migration. By the end of the first year, humanity is reduced to a fraction of its former population. Radiation, starvation, disease, and social collapse kill more people than the weapons themselves. Civilization has fallen. Survival becomes the only goal. Despite the unprecedented scale of the conflict, nuclear war does not destroy the planet evenly. Strategic logic governs targeting decisions. Nations focus on disabling an adversary's ability to command, produce, communicate, and retaliate, not on annihilating every population center. As a result, large areas of the world remain physically intact. Entire continents avoid direct nuclear impact, even as global systems collapse around them. Infrastructure may survive, but connectivity does not. Electricity grids fail. Fuel supplies run dry. Trade disappears. This uneven destruction creates a sharp divide between regions that lose everything and regions that lose coordination but retain physical viability. This division becomes the foundation of the post-war world and determines where civilization can continue in any recognizable form. Regions that once dominated global politics, finance, and military power suffer the most severe consequences. Large parts of North America, Europe, Russia, East Asia, and South Asia become dead zones defined by radiation exposure, infrastructure collapse, and long-term uninhabitability. In these areas, survival beyond the first year is rare. Water treatment systems fail almost immediately. Hospitals are destroyed, abandoned, or overwhelmed. Food distribution collapses entirely. Fallout contaminates soils and rivers, making agriculture impossible for decades. Even regions spared direct nuclear strikes are overwhelmed by refugees, disease, and social breakdown. These zones do not recover within human timescales. They remain fractured landscapes of ruin, radiation, and isolated enclaves. In contrast, several parts of the world retain partial or full functionality. Australia and New Zealand emerge as some of the most stable post-war regions. Geographic isolation protects them from direct strikes, while strong agricultural capacity allows food self-sufficiency. Over time, these nations become heavily fortified, preserving stability through controlled isolation. South America, particularly Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, retains fertile land, fresh water, and relatively low radiation exposure. As global trade disappears, these countries shift toward regional food networks and controlled exports. Agriculture becomes the primary source of power, replacing industry and finance. Iceland and Greenland retain functionality due to geothermal energy, low population density, and isolation. Their harsh climates limit population growth, but energy independence and minimal fallout allow long-term survival. The most devastating phase begins months after the war. Smoke and soot from burning cities rise into the stratosphere, where rain cannot wash them away. Sunlight is blocked on a global scale. Average temperatures drop sharply, shortening growing seasons or eliminating them entirely in many regions. Marine ecosystems suffer from reduced photosynthesis, collapsing fisheries and coastal food systems. Mass migration follows. Hundreds of millions move toward equatorial and southern regions in search of warmth and arable land. Borders harden. Conflicts over food and water replace ideological wars as the dominant source of violence. The post-war world is no longer interconnected. Globalization collapses permanently. Supply chains do not recover. Complex manufacturing becomes impossible without international coordination. Advanced technology survives only in isolated pockets, not as a global system. In many regions, technology regresses, not due to a lack of knowledge, but due to the absence of materials, energy, and specialized labor. Civilization reorganizes into regional systems based on proximity, self-sufficiency, and resilience. Long-distance trade exists only where maritime routes remain viable and secure, and even then, it is limited and heavily protected. Beyond climate cooling, nuclear winter triggers long-term environmental instability. Acid rain alters soil chemistry, reducing agricultural productivity for decades. Wildfires permanently reshape ecosystems, pushing many species into extinction. Ice melt and ocean current disruption further destabilize global climate patterns. Radiation zones become accidental wildlife preserves. In the absence of humans, animals adapt rapidly, reclaiming urban spaces, industrial zones, and former agricultural land. Nature does not recover to its previous state. It evolves into something new. The world does not die in a single moment. It fractures region by region into something unfamiliar. But fragmentation is not the final chapter. Now we explore what rises from that broken landscape. Not one future, but many. 6 distinct paths of survival. Because after civilization falls, humanity does not simply endure, it transforms. They call it safety, but it's really a trade, air for freedom. When the bombs fall, the lucky reach government bunkers, private shelters, and abandoned military complexes. Artificial lighting replaces the sun. Hydroponics replace soil. Machines recycle water in closed loops. At first, it feels like order survived. Schedules, duties, rules, rations. A routine is a powerful drug. But then the months stack into years. No sunlight breaks sleep cycles. People become exhausted, irritable, paranoid. In a bunker, small conflicts don't fade, they ferment. Children grow up never seeing the sky. A whole generation learns that Earth is a story adults tell to keep them calm, and everything depends on maintenance. One filter failure, one contaminated intake, one broken seal. Thousands die in a place designed to keep them alive. The bunker age can last a long time, but its enemy isn't radiation, it's time. And eventually the question becomes unavoidable. When do you open the hatch? And what's waiting outside? Outside, survivors gather around one thing: clean water. A town with a well becomes a state. A state becomes a fortress. Former soldiers, engineers, farmers, and charismatic leaders form councils or dictatorships. Walls rise. Checkpoints appear. Curfews become law. Daily life becomes a split screen, half farming, half defense. Water is filtered through charcoal, sand, improvised chemicals. Medical supplies vanish fast. A simple infection becomes a death sentence. Then comes the hardest decision. Outsiders. Do you let them in and risk disease, violence, sabotage? Or turn them away and create enemies who now know where you live? These micronations clash over land, seed stock, livestock, fuel. Alliances form, break, reform. Like old geopolitics, but uglier. In the hardest hit regions, nothing stays standing long enough to rebuild. Fallout blankets cities. Rivers go toxic. Infrastructure rots. Governments vanish in days. Gangs and militias move through ruins like weather.
Tacos, tacos, tacos. Crunch tacos. Tacos, tacos, tacos. Crunch, crunch, crunch. 6 tacos for $6. Crunch, crunch, your time. Tacos, tacos, tacos.
Food becomes the central religion. Canned goods, small game, anything that moves, anything that doesn't kill you first. Children grow up without school, without stability, without a future. Some regions fall under warlords, others splinter into tribes. Life becomes violent, short, unpredictable. A tiny fraction of humanity survives above the planet. Astronauts, space agency staff, scientists, billionaires, orbital stations, lunar bases, Mars outposts. Here, life is controlled perfection, air regenerated, water recycled, food grown under LEDs. But stability in space is fragile because nothing is forgiving. A micrometeoroid strike, a radiation storm, and the habitat becomes a coffin. Psychologically, it's worse. Earth is below you, a dead sphere. Your home is gone. And you're alive in a metal box because a system keeps working. These colonies represent peak technology, but their timeline is brutal. They must expand, terraform, build self-repairing habitats, or die slowly. And the question that haunts them isn't, can we survive? It's this: do we ever return? Or are we becoming something else? Some survivors adopt the oldest strategy of all: never stay long enough to be found or poisoned. They move to avoid shifting fallout, depleted resources, and conflict. Hunter-gatherers with scavenge technology. Rifles passed down like heirlooms. Solar chargers powering radios. Carts, bikes, improvised vehicles. Nomads become experts in one thing: reading the land. Weather patterns, radiation zones, water signs, edible plants, herbal medicine. The question here is fundamental. Can a civilization exist without roots? Or will movement keep them alive, but keep them primitive forever? The ocean becomes a shield. Survivors gather on cargo ships, oil platforms, container-built floating cities. Fishing, desalination, algae cultivation, the new pillars of life. At sea, fallout is weaker, but danger is constant. Storms, rogue waves, mechanical decay. Without maintenance, engines fail. Desalination units degrade. Metal corrodes. Navigation becomes deadly if satellites and GPS networks are gone, and piracy returns, not as a crime but as survival. Yet with coordination, these societies can stabilize. Solar arrays, wind turbines, floating greenhouses, aquaponics. And then the most haunting dilemma arrives: land. Is Earth safe enough to return? Or does the ocean become home forever, and humanity evolves into a maritime species? So those are the 6 paths, some hopeful, some horrifying, and one that changes the definition of human. But they all share one truth: nuclear war doesn't end the story, it rewrites the species. And every future you just saw exists because of one moment at the beginning: a decision, a mistake, a false alarm, a chain reaction nobody could stop. It doesn't start with an explosion. It starts with a whisper. A secure line lights up, a coded phrase, a tone no one ever wants to hear. Somewhere deep inside the Pentagon, inside NORAD, early warning systems have just detected something impossible to ignore: multiple high-velocity objects rising from hostile territory. They're not aircraft. They're not satellites. They're nuclear missiles. And in that moment, the most protected human being on Earth becomes the most hunted. The instant confirmation hits, the President of the United States is no longer treated as an individual. He becomes a strategic asset. Within seconds, the United States Secret Service initiates continuity protocols, plans designed for one purpose: keep the president alive long enough to maintain command of the United States. Because if the president dies, the chain of command fractures, and that could be more dangerous than the missiles themselves. A military aide rushes forward carrying a black briefcase. You've seen it before, but now it's real. The nuclear football. Inside is not a button. It's far more complex and far more terrifying. Encrypted communication tools, strike options, authentication codes, and a small card carried separately by the president, the biscuit. Without it, nothing launches. Without it, retaliation dies. And without retaliation, deterrence collapses. Let's stop for a second. What exactly is headed toward the United States? Because this determines everything. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, like the RS-28 Sarmat, can travel over 18,000 kilometers per hour, carrying multiple nuclear warheads, each capable of destroying a city. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles, like the Trident II D5 used by the US, but mirrored by adversaries, can strike with almost no warning from oceans, just off the coast. And then there are hypersonic weapons like the Avangard, capable of maneuvering unpredictably at extreme speeds, making interception nearly impossible. Time to impact? 15 to 30 minutes, sometimes less. Now imagine trying to survive that. Here's the twist. The survival plan depends entirely on location, because the president is constantly moving. The White House, Air Force One, a public event, a foreign country. Each scenario triggers a completely different survival protocol. Let's break the most dangerous one. This is where things get serious, because despite its iconic image, the White House is not designed to withstand a direct nuclear strike. So what happens? The Secret Service doesn't wait. They move instantly. The president is rushed underground into the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, or PEOC, a hardened bunker beneath the White House. But here's the problem. It's not enough. The PEOC is designed for short-term survival, not for a full-scale nuclear war. So the real goal isn't to stay, it's to escape. At this point, every second matters. Why? Because once missiles are confirmed, the United States must decide whether to respond before impact. This is called launch on warning, and yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. The president may have less than 10 minutes to decide whether to unleash the most destructive weapons in human history. Weapons like the Minuteman III, sitting in underground silos across America, or submarine-based arsenals hidden beneath the oceans. But here's the terrifying part. Once launched, they cannot be recalled. Picture this, a screen showing incoming trajectories, and a simple question. Mr. President, do you confirm retaliation? No second chances, no undo button. Just a decision that could end civilization. Whether a launch is ordered or not, one thing is certain. The president must disappear. Fast. Helicopters are already spinning up on the South Lawn. Marine One lifts off within minutes, escorted by decoys and armed aircraft. Destination? Classified, but likely one of two options: a hardened underground facility or something far more mobile. If time allows, the president is transferred to a Boeing E-4B. This is not a normal aircraft, it's a doomsday plane, designed to survive electromagnetic pulses, nuclear shockwaves, and the collapse of ground infrastructure. Inside, it becomes a flying command center, capable of controlling U.S. nuclear forces even if the ground is destroyed. Think about that. Even if cities vanish, command still exists. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. If the attack is too fast or too close, escape may not be possible. So what then? The president relies on layered defenses. Missile defense systems like ground-based mid-course defense attempt to intercept incoming warheads. But their success rate is limited. They're not designed to stop a massive nuclear strike. They're designed to reduce damage, not prevent it. Even if the president survives the blast, there's another threat: an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP. High-altitude nuclear detonations can fry electronics across entire continents. No power, no communications, no internet. Which means even survival isn't enough. The president must remain connected. And that's why all critical systems, planes, bunkers, command centers, are hardened against EMP. Because losing communication means losing control. Let's shift perspective. What happens after the initial strike? Where does the president go? One possible destination is the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, a hidden underground complex designed to house government leadership during nuclear war. Self-sufficient, secure, unknown to most of the public. But here's the catch. Even this bunker isn't meant to last forever. It's a bridge, not a solution. This is where things get strategic. Because survival isn't just about the president, it's about the system. Plans exist to ensure that even if Washington is destroyed, the United States still functions. Backup leaders, distributed command centers, mobile military authority. Because the goal isn't just survival, it's continuity. Here's something most people don't realize. The most survivable part of the U.S. nuclear command structure isn't on land. It's underwater. Ballistic missile submarines, like those carrying Trident II D5s, remain hidden in the oceans at all times. Undetectable, unreachable. Even if the entire country is hit, they survive. And that guarantees one thing: retaliation is always possible. Let's pause again. You might think that the goal is to keep the president alive at all costs, but that's not entirely true. The real goal is this: maintain the ability to command the United States. If the president survives but cannot communicate, cannot issue orders, cannot control forces, then strategically, it's the same as losing him. Adversaries know all of this, which is why they may attempt a decapitation strike, targeting leadership directly. Weapons like hypersonic glide vehicles, again like Avangard, are specifically designed to
Introducing Iron Beam, the best choice for futures trading. Iron Beam is the industry-leading broker catering to traders worldwide. With the free Iron Beam platform and free real-time data, you can trade the most popular futures contracts anywhere and from any device. Low day trade margins, free depth of market, hundreds of indicators, and trading directly off the chart. Makes your trading more powerful than ever. Open an account today to trade with the best. Iron Beam.
to function under unimaginable pressure. If the president survives the first strike, that's only the beginning. Now comes fallout, infrastructure collapse, global instability, and possible second strikes. Everything you've just heard is designed to ensure one thing: nuclear war never happens. Because the entire system, missiles, submarines, bunkers, aircraft, is built on deterrence. The idea that no matter what happens, the United States will respond. And that makes the cost too high for anyone to try. The president can survive. The system can endure. Command can continue. But the question isn't just whether the president lives, it's this: what kind of world would still exist if he does? At first, it feels like nothing. No heat touches your skin. No sound breaks the silence. The city around you stands perfectly still, like it was paused mid-life. Dust rises under your boots, barely noticeable. The wind carries it away. And then, the device in your hand begins to react. A soft click, then another. Then a rapid, chaotic crackling that fills the silence. Because what surrounds you is not destruction in the way we understand it. It's something far worse. It's contamination that doesn't end. And these places, real places still existing today, are not just reminders of past disasters. They are fragments of a future that could still happen. When people think about nuclear events, they imagine the moment of impact, the blinding flash, the shockwave tearing through buildings, the mushroom cloud rising into the sky. But all of that is over in seconds. Radiation is what remains. And radiation doesn't behave like anything else we know. It doesn't burn like fire or move like water. It embeds itself into the world, into the ground, into the air, into living tissue. The real danger begins after everything looks calm again. Some radioactive elements decay quickly, disappearing within days or weeks. But others, like cesium-137 or strontium-90, remain active for decades, slowly poisoning ecosystems. And then there are elements like plutonium, which can persist for tens of thousands of years, effectively outliving entire civilizations. What makes this even more dangerous is how radiation interacts with the human body. It doesn't need to kill instantly. It only needs to break things at the smallest level. Inside your body, radiation damages DNA. Cells begin to malfunction. Some die, others mutate. Over time, organs fail, cancers develop, and systems that once worked perfectly begin to collapse. When Reactor 4 exploded at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, it didn't just release energy. It released the core of a nuclear reactor directly into the environment. Inside the destroyed structure, nuclear fuel melted together with concrete and metal, forming a substance known as corium. One of these masses, later called the elephant's foot, was so radioactive that standing near it for minutes would have been fatal when it first formed. But the real transformation happened outside. Radioactive particles were carried into the atmosphere and then settled unevenly across the surrounding region. This created a patchwork of contamination, where one area could be relatively safe, while another, just meters away, remained dangerously radioactive. The forest nearby absorbed an enormous dose of radiation almost instantly. Trees turned reddish-brown and died, giving rise to what is now known as the Red Forest. Even today, disturbing that soil can release radioactive dust back into the air, effectively reactivating contamination decades later. This is one of the most important lessons Chernobyl teaches. Radiation doesn't simply fade away. It cycles. Wind lifts particles. Rain pushes them deeper. Fires can redistribute them again. The environment itself becomes a storage system for contamination. And yet life returned. Animals moved back into the zone. Wolves roam freely. Birds nest in abandoned structures. From a distance, it looks like nature has reclaimed the land. But closer studies reveal something different. Higher mutation rates, reduced lifespans, subtle biological damage that doesn't stop the ecosystem, but reshapes it. Chernobyl isn't healed. It's adapted to being damaged. At the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the disaster unfolded without a massive explosion tearing material into the sky. Instead, it moved quietly downward and outward. When the reactors overheated, nuclear fuel melted and formed corium, similar to Chernobyl. But in this case, the material interacted with groundwater. Water flowed through the site, became contaminated, and had to be captured and stored. Thousands of tanks now hold treated radioactive water, each one a temporary solution to a longer-term problem. But water doesn't stay still. Some contamination reached the ocean, where it entered a completely different system. Unlike land, where contamination can remain localized, the ocean distributes it through currents that span entire continents. This doesn't mean the ocean became instantly deadly. It means the contamination spreads, dilutes, and integrates. Small organisms absorb radioactive particles. Larger organisms eat them. The process continues upward through the food chain, concentrating radiation at each level. Eventually, it reaches humans. Fukushima revealed something critical. Radiation doesn't just destroy environments, it becomes part of them. At Bikini Atoll, nuclear detonations didn't just destroy structures, they transformed an entire ecosystem. One of the most powerful tests, Castle Bravo, released far more energy than expected. Fallout spread across nearby islands, contaminating soil and vegetation. Over time, something unexpected became clear. The danger wasn't just in the air or on the surface, it was in the food. Plants absorbed radioactive particles from the soil. Coconuts, a primary food source, became contaminated. People returning years later were exposed not through direct radiation, but through daily consumption of local resources. This is one of the most dangerous aspects of radiation. It hides inside normal life. You eat, you drink, you live, and slowly it accumulates. Even today, parts of Bikini Atoll remain unsafe for long-term habitation, not because they look destroyed, but because they are fundamentally changed. Each of these places represents a different aspect of radiation. Chernobyl shows how land becomes contaminated and remains unpredictable. Fukushima shows how radiation moves through water and spreads across ecosystems. Bikini Atoll shows how ecosystems integrate contamination into daily life. Now, imagine all of this happening at once. In a nuclear war, multiple detonations would inject massive amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Fallout would spread across continents. Water systems would carry contamination further. Agricultural land would become unreliable or unstable. Even regions far from direct strikes would face consequences. Food chains would break down. Clean water would become scarce. The global system that supports modern life would begin to collapse, not instantly, but progressively. And this is where the real danger lies, not in the moment of destruction, but in what follows. These places already exist. You can stand in them today. You can walk through abandoned streets in Pripyat. You can measure radiation levels in the soil. You can see nature growing over structures that were never meant to be left behind. They're not theoretical. They're evidence. Each one is a fragment of a larger picture. And when combined, they show something deeply unsettling. Nuclear events don't just destroy cities. They create conditions where rebuilding may not be possible. Not because everything is gone, but because everything that remains is no longer safe.
J. Robert Oppenheimer once famously said, "Now I am death, destroyer of worlds," and he was right. But why? It's because he led a group of the world's top scientists during World War II to create the first atomic bomb. The power of this bomb was like nothing humankind had ever seen before. When these bombs were unleashed on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it demonstrated the world-crushing capabilities of the weapon. But how does an atomic bomb actually work? The bomb's origins are actually rooted in Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared. This stated that energy is equivalent to mass times the speed of light squared. A simple way of breaking this down is that there is an equivalence between mass and energy. If you could change some matter rapidly into energy, then you could harness that energy in a nuclear reactor, or as Oppenheimer's team did, seal it inside a bomb ready to cause devastation. The problem that the Manhattan Project had when developing the atomic bomb is that they needed a certain kind of uranium. Most uranium is the kind with isotope 238. In fact, around 99% of the world's uranium has this property. The issue with this is that it's not as volatile as its very rare cousin, uranium-235. Oppenheimer's team needed to be creative and manipulate the uranium they had to separate the material they needed for a massive reaction from uranium ore. The team used several methods to achieve this result, known as uranium enrichment, which included centrifuges, gaseous diffusion, thermal diffusion, and electromagnetic separation.
Make your browser fast. Make your browser safe. Make your browser Chrome. Choose Google Chrome for your computer.
Although the two bombs had similar reactions that we've already explored, their method of detonation was very different. The first bomb was called Little Boy. This was the one dropped on Hiroshima that was responsible for at least 70,000 deaths. The bomb had two separate pieces of uranium, neither of which was big enough to achieve critical mass. These pieces were kept apart until the very last minute. When the bomb was ready to be exploded, these pieces were smashed together using a mechanism similar to a gun. One piece of uranium was shot down a smoothbore gun barrel and smashed into the other piece. The impact got the critical mass needed and generated the first nuclear explosion in warfare. Fat Man was the bomb detonated over Nagasaki. This used the less reactive plutonium-239. The gun method was deemed not strong enough to achieve the blast required. Fission would have started too early, and the reaction would have been too slow for the bomb to reach a critical mass. The solution to this was a hollow sphere of subcritical plutonium found in the belly of the bomb. This was surrounded by conventional explosives. When this was set off, it created a huge implosion which increased the density of the plutonium when everything was smashed together. This allowed it to create a supercritical state. It's now easy to see how Oppenheimer described himself as a destroyer of worlds. The energy created by the two A-bombs at the end of the war was like nothing the planet had ever seen before. And it was all created by manipulating the most volatile materials that the scientist and his team could get their hands on.
You're scrolling your phone, sipping coffee, maybe sitting in traffic. Then everything stops. The lights die. Your car stalls. Planes drop from the sky. Somewhere far off, a mushroom cloud blooms on the horizon. You think this can't be real, but it is. In 2025, nuclear war isn't a Cold War ghost. It's a real modern threat. Faster missiles, smarter warheads, fragile diplomacy, and just one mistake away from the end of civilization. This is what happens when that mistake is made. It doesn't begin with nukes. It begins with a spark. Tensions boil over. A Chinese blockade of Taiwan. Russian troops cross into the Baltics. North Korea launches a missile that strays into Japanese territory. Panic, confusion, scrambled communication. And then a false radar warning. Or maybe it's real. Military leaders have to decide, launch now or risk losing everything. The US initiates launch on warning. The U.S. nuclear triad activates. 400 Minuteman III ICBMs erupt from hardened silos across the Midwest. Each can carry up to 3 warheads, though most are armed with a single W-87 or W-78 warhead. 14 Ohio-class submarines, each capable of launching 20 Trident II D5 SLBMs, release their payloads from underwater bastions in the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. These missiles can carry up to 14 independently targetable warheads. B-2 stealth bombers and B-52 Stratofortresses take off from bases like Whiteman Air Force Base and Barksdale Air Force Base. They carry a mix of gravity bombs, B-61, B-83, and air-launched cruise missiles, AGM-86Bs. Targets include Russian and Chinese missile silos, radar sites, mobile ICBM launch zones, submarine pens, and command bunkers. The logic? Eliminate their ability to strike back. But it's already too late. In response, Russia unleashes its full arsenal. RS-28 Sarmat, or Satan II ICBMs, launched from silos across Siberia. Each missile carries up to 15 MIRVs with yields of 750 kilotons to 1 megaton. Bore-class submarines, each with 16 Balava SLBMs, fire from patrol zones in the Arctic and Pacific. Avangard hypersonic glide vehicles, capable of Mach 20 speeds and maneuvering flight paths, descend on U.S. missile defense bunkers and continuity of government sites. Air-launched cruise missiles like the KH-102 and ship-based Calibers swarm toward NATO capitals. Russia activates its perimeter system, a last resort automated retaliatory network. Even if Moscow is obliterated, the remaining nuclear forces will launch. China, hit by American warheads, retaliates. DF-41 ICBMs, with range over 12,000 kilometers and up to 10 MIRVs each, launch from deep inland silos and mobile launchers. JL-3 SLBMs streak from Type 094A and newer Type 096 submarines hidden in the Western Pacific. DF-17 and DF-27 hypersonic missiles target Guam, Hawaii, and carrier strike groups. Chinese targets include U.S. bases in the Pacific, Andersen Air Force Base and Yokosuka Naval Base, missile fields in Montana and North Dakota, and tech hubs like Silicon Valley. The conflict spreads like wildfire. India and Pakistan exchange tactical nukes. Delhi, Islamabad, Lahore, and Mumbai vanish in flames. North Korea fires Hwasong-17S and KN-23 short-range missiles towards Seoul, Tokyo, and possibly California. Some reach targets, others are intercepted. Israel, under threat from Iranian missiles and Hezbollah attacks, launches Jericho-3 missiles and Popeye Turbo Cruise missiles from Dolphin-class submarines. Cities from Tehran to Tel Aviv, Seoul to Karachi are incinerated. The first warheads strike. Washington, D.C. is turned into a crater. The White House, Pentagon, gone. Moscow is obliterated. Berlin, London, Paris, reduced to fire and ash. New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, erased from the map. Hundreds of thousands die instantly. Millions more burn, suffocate, or are crushed in collapsing buildings. "44 ground-based interceptors at Fort Greely and Vandenberg Air Force Base target incoming ICBMs. THAAD and Aegis systems fire in defense of NATO and East Asian allies. Patriot batteries surround critical command centers and air bases. They stop some, but it's a numbers game. Hypersonics slip through. MIRVs release decoys. 1,500 plus warheads still get through, many with 500 to 800 kiloton yields. Entire cities become furnaces. Temperatures reach 1,500 degrees Celsius. Firestorms create hurricane-force winds, pulling oxygen from the air. Skyscrapers become torches. Entire neighborhoods vanish. Clouds of radioactive dust rise into the atmosphere. Fallout spreads via the jet stream. The American Midwest is blanketed in ash. Central Europe glows with residual radiation. East Asia's breadbasket turns toxic. Even untouched nations face agricultural and health disasters. In 60 minutes, over 2,000 nuclear weapons have detonated. Between 1 and 2 billion people are dead or dying. 90% of global industry is destroyed. Major governments no longer function. Medical systems are obliterated. The internet is gone. Power grids are shattered. The survivors? Trapped in bunkers, subway tunnels, or mountain caves. Battling radiation sickness, starvation, and psychological trauma. Waiting, not for rescue, but for the slow death that follows. Nuclear war is not just possible. It's one chain reaction away. One error, one miscalculation is all it takes. If nuclear war begins, there is no winner, only ash, silence, and regret. The clock is ticking. If nuclear war started tonight, most Americans already believe they know where the danger is. New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. Those cities would almost certainly be destroyed within minutes. But here's the terrifying truth most people never realize. Some of the first nuclear explosions wouldn't happen in cities at all. They would happen in places that look quiet, empty, even peaceful. Wide farmland, remote plains, small towns few people have ever heard of. Because nuclear war isn't just about killing civilians. It's about destroying weapons, infrastructure, and the ability to fight back. And many of those targets sit far away from major cities. In fact, several states that feel safe today would actually be among the first places hit in a nuclear war. Meanwhile, a handful of states might quietly sit near the bottom of every nuclear target list. Not completely safe, but far less likely to experience a direct nuclear strike. To understand which states might survive, we need to understand how nuclear targets are chosen. Military planners don't just randomly pick cities. They follow a very specific strategy. And the first targets are almost always the same: nuclear weapons. The most important targets in nuclear war are the weapons themselves: intercontinental ballistic missile silos, strategic bomber.
Whoa.
What's that?
I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, Nina just built an app.
Impossible.
Nina can't code.
Interesting. Can it generate reports?
It can now.
Nice.
So you're saying we can all build apps now?
Yeah.
I'm on lunch. I gotta make a call.
I'll be in my
office.
Just built an inventory tracker.
Protein calculator.
Book sharing app.
A workflow manager that
Tracks who still owes for the group lunch.
Trash duty schedule.
Since no one seems to care.
just built a performance
I just created
manager.
a goal tracking system.
We built the same thing, didn't we?
Yep.
Can this thing manage contact?
Is the SOC 2 compliant?
I want to animate this graph.
Create a party planner.
Profesor de Español.
An inter-office dating app. For dogs. For office dogs. You know what I mean?
Extremely high priority targets. Only after those targets come large population centers. Cities represent economic power, industry, and transportation networks. Destroying them creates chaos and cripples the country's ability to recover. Which means places like New York, Chicago, Houston, and Los Angeles would almost certainly be attacked. Once you remove all those high priority targets from the map, something interesting happens. A few states remain that simply aren't very valuable nuclear targets, and that dramatically reduces the chance they would be struck. Maine sits quietly in the far northeast corner of the United States. Forests, small towns, rocky coastline. For most of its history, it has remained one of the most peaceful states in the country. And strangely enough, that may work in its favor during nuclear war. Maine has very little strategic military infrastructure. No nuclear missile fields, no major bomber bases, no massive military command centers. And its population is relatively small compared to other states along the East Coast, which means nuclear planners would likely focus their warheads elsewhere. But Maine isn't completely safe, because just a few hundred miles south sits one of the largest population corridors in the world, the Northeast megalopolis: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington. If several of those cities were destroyed, radioactive fallout could drift north depending on wind patterns. So Maine might avoid the initial explosions, but the aftermath could still be dangerous. Just west of Maine sits another state that rarely appears on nuclear target maps: Vermont. It's small, quiet, mostly rural, and in nuclear war planning, that matters. Because the primary purpose of nuclear weapons is to destroy things that affect military power, and Vermont has very few of those, which means attacking Vermont provides very little military advantage. At first glance, Oregon might seem like a risky place to be during a nuclear war. After all, it sits directly on the Pacific Ocean, and the Pacific is home to many U.S. naval forces. But compared to its neighbors, Oregon is relatively quiet. California hosts massive military infrastructure, naval bases, Air Force installations, huge industrial centers. Washington State hosts one of the most critical nuclear submarine bases in the United States, which makes it an extremely valuable target. Oregon, by comparison, sits between these two heavily defended regions, and that reduces its strategic importance. The state has moderate population, limited strategic military targets, large rural regions. This one may surprise you, because South Dakota sits in the middle of the United States. But unlike neighboring states like Montana and North Dakota, South Dakota does not host large nuclear missile fields, which dramatically changes its strategic value. Many of the most heavily targeted locations in the United States are missile silos scattered across the northern plains. Hundreds of underground launch facilities, each one capable of launching an intercontinental nuclear missile. During a nuclear war, enemy warheads would target these silos in an attempt to destroy them before they launch. But South Dakota contains far fewer of these strategic assets. Its population is small, its industry is limited, and its military infrastructure is relatively modest. When researchers study nuclear targeting maps, one state often appears near the bottom of the list: Idaho. And the reasons are surprisingly simple. Idaho has no massive population centers, no major nuclear missile fields, very limited strategic military infrastructure. Much of the state is mountainous wilderness, or farmland, or small rural communities. From a military perspective, destroying Idaho provides very little strategic advantage, which means nuclear planners would likely allocate their warheads elsewhere. Another factor working in Idaho's favor is geography. The state sits far from many of the largest coastal cities in the United States, which could reduce the impact of radioactive fallout compared to regions along the East Coast or Pacific Coast. For these reasons, Idaho is often considered one of the least likely states to experience a direct nuclear strike. If hundreds of nuclear weapons detonated across major cities and industrial zones, massive firestorms could send smoke into the upper atmosphere, blocking sunlight, lowering global temperatures, and devastating agriculture. Scientists estimate global food production could collapse for years. So, are these states safe? Not exactly. In nuclear war, nowhere on Earth is truly safe. But some places would face far fewer direct nuclear strikes than others. And that difference could determine whether people face immediate destruction or a long and uncertain fight for survival. Because in nuclear war, the most dangerous place isn't always the biggest city. Sometimes, it's the places hiding the most powerful weapons. And the safest places are often the ones the world simply forgets. Imagine a city glowing brighter than the sun for a split second. An invisible shockwave races through the air, flattening everything in its path. A fireball so hot, it vaporizes steel, concrete, and flesh alike. This is not science fiction. It's the brutal reality behind every nuclear explosion ever detonated. The true scale of a nuclear blast is a terrifying force of nature, shaped by physics, but felt deeply by humanity. On August 6, 1945, the uranium gun-type bomb known as Little Boy detonated about 600 meters above Hiroshima. Weighing 4,400 kilograms, stretching 3 meters long and 71 centimeters in diameter, it unleashed a 15-kiloton explosion. The fireball grew to over 280 meters wide in milliseconds, reaching temperatures hotter than the sun's surface, over 5 million degrees Celsius, vaporizing everything beneath it. The resulting shockwave produced overpressures above 20 psi within a 1-kilometer radius, crushing reinforced concrete buildings. Thermal radiation caused third-degree burns up to 3 kilometers away and ignited fires across the city. Immediate fatalities reached 70,000 to 80,000, with total casualties surpassing 140,000 by year's end. Survivors suffered from the searing heat, deadly radiation sickness, and psychological trauma that lasted decades. The B-61 family is a shape-shifting beast of destruction, offering yields from a tactical 0.3 kilotons to a strategic 340 kilotons. This thermonuclear gravity bomb, roughly 3.5 meters long and weighing 320 kilograms, can be dropped from a variety of aircraft. At maximum yield, the B-61 produces a fireball about 700 meters wide, incinerating all within its core. The blast wave shatters windows 20 kilometers away and flattens buildings within 5 kilometers. Thermal radiation would cause lethal third-degree burns up to 15 kilometers out, setting fires that rage uncontrollably. The B-61's variable yield makes it suitable for different mission profiles, from battlefield strikes to strategic city destruction. Fallout patterns would cause long-lasting contamination, threatening public health and agriculture far beyond the blast zone. The Minuteman III, a solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile weighing 35,000 kilograms and measuring 18 meters long, carries up to 3 warheads, each delivering 300 to 500 kilotons. Capable of striking targets 13,000 kilometers away within 30 minutes, a single 500 kiloton warhead detonating above Vladivostok's city center would generate a fireball over 1 kilometer wide, vaporizing everything below. The blast wave would crush buildings within 5 kilometers, producing overpressures exceeding 20 psi. Thermal radiation would cause third-degree burns up to 10 kilometers away, igniting catastrophic fires. Casualties? Over 1 million dead, millions displaced, a city erased in minutes, followed by months of chaos and suffering. From stealthy Ohio-class submarines, the Trident II D5 launches missiles 13.4 meters long, weighing 59,000 kilograms, carrying up to 14 warheads ranging from 100 to 455 kilotons each, capable of striking targets more than 11,000 kilometers away. A 455 kiloton warhead exploding over St. Petersburg would create a fireball 1.2 kilometers wide, instantly vaporizing the center. The blast wave levels structures within 5 kilometers, while thermal radiation causes deadly burns up to 15 kilometers out, igniting massive fires across the city. The death toll would exceed 1.5 million, with infrastructure destroyed and radiation poisoning lingering for years. The stealth of its underwater launch means no warning, a silent nightmare. The Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle, launched atop an ICBM, speeds at Mach 20 plus, evading missile defenses with its eye maneuverability. Carrying a 2-megaton warhead, it produces a 1.5 kilometer wide fireball and a destructive blast wave exceeding 10 kilometers, with thermal radiation igniting fires 20 kilometers away. Its hypersonic speed and unpredictable flight path leave almost no time for detection or interception. Detonated over New York City, millions could die in seconds, with little to no warning. China's DF-5 liquid-fueled ICBM, standing 33 meters tall and weighing 183 kilograms, can deliver a 5-megaton warhead more than 13,000.
This mug started as a sketch in a notebook. Now it has its own website. Acting
wide, vaporizing central wards instantly. The shockwave would demolish buildings within 15 kilometers, while thermal radiation would ignite fires stretching 30 kilometers beyond. Over 5 million would die immediately, with devastation spanning miles. Russia's RS-28 Sarmat is a monstrous 35-meter-tall ICBM, weighing over 200,000 kilograms, capable of carrying up to 10 warheads each, packing 10 to 50 megatons of explosive power. A 50-megaton warhead detonating over Chicago's downtown generates a fireball nearly 6 kilometers wide, instantly vaporizing the city and surrounding suburbs. The shockwave flattens buildings up to 40 kilometers away, with thermal radiation causing fatal burns up to 100 kilometers out, sparking an unstoppable firestorm. The scale of radioactive fallout from such an explosion would contaminate vast areas across multiple states, forcing mass evacuations and rendering land uninhabitable for decades. Fallout particles would enter the atmosphere, potentially triggering global climate effects by injecting soot and radioactive materials high into the stratosphere, a nuclear winter scenario. Immediate deaths would number in the tens of millions, with radioactive fallout poisoning half a continent for years to come. Poseidon is a nuclear-powered underwater drone carrying an estimated 100 megaton warhead, traveling at over 100 kilometers per hour underwater and capable of traveling thousands of kilometers stealthily. A detonation in San Francisco Bay would create a massive underwater shockwave and tsunami, devastating the coastline. Radioactive fallout would poison the Pacific coast for decades, rendering the region uninhabitable. Millions could drown or die from radiation poisoning. This weapon doesn't just destroy cities. It contaminates entire ecosystems and coastal regions for generations, crippling economies and livelihoods. The world balances on a knife's edge. One spark, one miscalculation, or one choice away from nuclear catastrophe. The true scale of nuclear explosions demands we act before the next blast changes everything. Will humanity learn in time, or be consumed by its own destructive power? Imagine the unimaginable. The world's largest superpower, the United States, comes under a nuclear threat as missiles rain down from the sky. ICBMs, or intercontinental ballistic missiles, hurtle toward American soil, launched from distant lands like Russia or North Korea. It's a nightmare scenario, one that seems too terrifying to entertain. But the reality is, nuclear ICBMs could hit U.S. soil within 30 minutes after launch. The question is, can the U.S. defend itself against this kind of attack? Before we explore the United States defense systems, it's essential to understand the missile threats it's up against. These are no ordinary missiles. They are weapons capable of annihilating cities and altering the course of history. Russia remains one of the U.S.'s most significant nuclear threats, given its extensive arsenal and its position as a major military power. Russia's nuclear doctrine allows for the first use of nuclear weapons, particularly in response to conventional threats or in regional conflicts. Some key Russian nuclear capabilities include the RS-28 Sarmat or Satan II ICBM, a heavy liquid-fueled missile capable of carrying multiple warheads, up to 15 MIRVs. This missile is designed to penetrate missile defense systems and target major U.S. cities or military installations. Range over 18,000 kilometers or 11,200 miles. Payload up to 40 megatons of TNT in a single warhead, with multiple warhead options. R-36M or SS-18 Satan. Known as one of the most powerful ICBMs in the world, the R-36M remains a cornerstone of Russia's nuclear deterrence. Payload 10 MIRVs, each with a thermonuclear warhead. Range 16,000 kilometers or about 10,000 miles. Russia has developed the 3M-22 Zircon, a hypersonic missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. Its speed and maneuverability make it extremely difficult to intercept. Speed, Mach 8 to 9, or around 9,800 to 11,000 kilometers per hour. Range up to 1,000 kilometers, or 620 miles. China's rapid modernization of its nuclear arsenal is aimed at creating a credible deterrent against the U.S. and other powers. China maintains a no-first-use nuclear policy, but its military doctrines have evolved, with increasing emphasis on the potential use of nuclear weapons in a conflict. DF-41 ICBM, China's most advanced ICBM, capable of carrying multiple nuclear warheads. The DF-41 is a critical part of China's nuclear deterrent, designed to counter U.S. and Russian missile defense systems. Range 12,000 kilometers, or about 7,500 miles. Payload up to 10 MIRVs. The DF-5, also known by its NATO reporting name CSS-4, is a liquid-fueled intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, developed by China. The DF-5 is capable of reaching over 12,000 kilometers, or 7,500 miles, allowing it to target virtually any location on the globe, including the continental United States. The DF-5 is designed to carry a single nuclear warhead, although it has been rumored that some variants could potentially carry multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, or MIRVs, allowing for multiple targets to be attacked with a single missile. North Korea. North Korea's nuclear ambitions have become a significant point of tension. While its nuclear arsenal is relatively small compared to Russia or China, its ballistic missile technology and willingness to escalate confrontations make it a potent threat. Hwasong-15 ICBM, North Korea's longest-range missile, capable of reaching the U.S. mainland, particularly the West Coast. Range over 13,000 kilometers, or 8,100 miles. Typically carries a single warhead, but there are indications that North Korea may seek to develop MIRVs. Hwasong-17 ICBM, an even larger missile that has been tested, with a potential range to target U.S. cities across the country. Range up to 15,000 kilometers, or 9,320 miles. Payload, likely capable of carrying multiple warheads. The United States possesses one of the world's most advanced nuclear arsenals, with approximately 5,550 nuclear warheads, both deployed and non-deployed. The B-83 gravity bomb is one of the most potent weapons in the U.S. nuclear inventory, designed to penetrate deep underground facilities. It's a powerful tool for targeting fortified sites that are difficult to destroy with conventional weapons. Yield range, up to 1.2 megatons, making it one of the most powerful weapons in the U.S. arsenal. Delivery platforms, strategic bombers such as the B-2 Spirit and B-52 Stratofortress. Minuteman III ICBMs, or intercontinental ballistic missiles. Deployed in 1970 and continually upgraded for reliability and effectiveness, the Minuteman III ICBM is a key part of the U.S. nuclear triad. Payload, can carry up to 3 MIRVs, each with a nuclear warhead. Guidance, advanced inertial navigation system for pinpoint accuracy. Speed, reaches up to Mach 23, or about 28,400 kilometers per hour, or about 17,600 miles per hour, enabling rapid global reach. Trident II SLBMs, or submarine-launched ballistic missiles. Known for their precision, stealth, and long range, Trident II SLBMs are deployed from nuclear-powered submarines and form a key part of the U.S. deterrent strategy. Payload, can carry up to 12 MIRVs, depending on treaty constraints. Guidance system, stellar inertial navigation, ensuring high accuracy even at extreme ranges. Range, approximately 12,000 kilometers, or 7,500 miles. In the event of a nuclear conflict, the safety of the U.S. president is paramount, not just for national leadership, but to maintain continuity of command and ensure that retaliatory actions can be taken if necessary. The U.S. has a comprehensive and well-established protocol in place for protecting the president during a nuclear attack or crisis. One of the key tools for the U.S. president in a nuclear emergency is a nuclear football, a briefcase that contains everything the president needs to authorize a nuclear strike, including authentication codes. The satchel includes classified communication and authentication codes required for verifying the president's identity and transmitting orders for a nuclear strike. Strike options. It also contains predetermined nuclear strike options, providing the president with a range of military responses in the event of a nuclear attack. Secure communication equipment. The football is equipped with communication tools, including satellite phones and encrypted radio systems, ensuring the president can maintain communication with military leaders and other key officials. The football is always with the president, carried by a military aide wherever the president goes. In case of a nuclear attack or other existential threats to the nation, the U.S. president has access to Air Force One, a specially equipped aircraft designed to keep the president safe while allowing them to exercise command over the military. Air Force One can function as a flying command center. The aircraft is capable of controlling military operations, including directing nuclear retaliation, even if the president is far from Washington, D.C. In the event of a nuclear strike or national emergency, The continuity of government, or COG system, ensures that the president, along with other key leaders, can remain in command. The U.S. government maintains underground facilities that can house the president, vice president, and other high-ranking officials in case of a nuclear attack. These facilities, like Raven Rock Mountain Complex and Mount Weather, are designed to withstand nuclear blasts and provide shelter and communication capabilities. Imagine it's the middle of the night at NORAD's headquarters in Colorado Springs. Monitors light up with a sudden...
If you don't know what's wrong, know where to go. Veg, the better, kinder ER for pets.
As early warning systems kick into high gear. Satellites detect missile heat signatures, transmitting real-time trajectory data to ground stations. Advanced radars across the U.S. and allied territories calculate impact zones, providing critical minutes for defensive action. With incoming missiles confirmed, the U.S. deploys its multi-layered missile defense systems. Fortunately, the U.S. has invested billions into missile defense systems. But the question remains, will these systems be enough? The first line of defense against an incoming ICBM is the Ground-Based Midcourse Defense System, or GMD. GMD is designed to intercept nuclear warheads during their mid-course phase, which is the time when they are traveling through space, just before re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. During this phase, missile defense systems can target warheads as they are in a predictable trajectory. The ground-based interceptors, or GBI, are launched from silos in places like Alaska and California to intercept and destroy ICBMs in space. These interceptors travel at high speeds, relying on kinetic energy to destroy the incoming missile. GMD uses a combination of radar systems, such as the sea-based X-band radar, and satellite tracking to pinpoint the exact location of the missile in space. However, GMD has limitations. Its success rate is somewhat contested. The system is designed to intercept missiles during a time when they are still on a predictable flight path, but advanced countermeasures like decoys, MIRVs, and decoy warheads can overwhelm the system. The U.S. has only 44 GBIs currently in operation, which limits the number of missiles that can be intercepted at once. While GMD handles missile defense in space, Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense, or BMD, operates in the terminal phase of a missile's flight, when it's re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Aegis uses Standard Missile 3, or SM-3 interceptors launched from Navy destroyers and cruisers. These interceptors are designed to intercept missiles up to 100 kilometers in altitude, well above commercial airliners, but lower than ICBM re-entry speeds. The Aegis system excels at handling short to medium-range ballistic missiles, but can also play a role in intercepting ICBMs. While Aegis isn't the primary line of defense for ICBM strikes, it adds an extra layer of protection, especially for regional missile threats. As the missile gets closer to its target, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD system, comes into play. THAAD is designed to intercept missiles in the terminal phase, just before they strike their target. The system uses hit-to-kill technology, meaning it destroys the incoming missiles by physically colliding with it at speeds greater than Mach 8. In other words, the intercepting missile hits the target with such force that it effectively destroys the warhead. THAAD is deployed in many places around the world and has a range of up to 200 kilometers. This gives it the capability to protect against regional missile threats, including North Korean ICBMs. However, against a full-scale Russian nuclear attack, THAAD may only be able to intercept a limited number of missiles. In the event of a missile strike on the U.S., it's important to consider what the enemy targets. The goal of a nuclear ICBM strike isn't just destruction. It's to cripple the U.S. and severely limit its ability to retaliate. The first targets of a nuclear strike would undoubtedly be the most populated cities: New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and other strategic locations. Destroying these urban centers would have a devastating psychological impact, while also crippling the economic and political heart of the nation. Widespread civilian casualties and chaos would ensure a swift collapse of national morale. Adversaries would also target military bases, particularly those housing nuclear weapons, ICBM silos, and missile defense systems. Crippling U.S. military capabilities would make it impossible for the U.S. to retaliate or defend itself. Key bases such as Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, and Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, would be the top of the target list. Finally, the enemy would strike at critical infrastructure, energy grids, transportation networks, and communication hubs. The goal here would be to paralyze the country, making it harder for the U.S. to organize a defense or recovery. Despite these defenses, no system is foolproof. Some missiles evade interception, striking key cities like Washington, D.C. and New York. As the first impacts occur, the U.S. initiates a measured but devastating counterstrike to neutralize Russia's nuclear capabilities. The U.S.'s survivable nuclear arsenal ensures that, even after a first strike, it can respond decisively. An Ohio-class submarine in the Arctic launches Trident II D5 missiles. Each missile splits into multiple warheads or MIRVs, targeting Russian missile silos, naval bases, and airfields. Minuteman III missiles roar out of silos across the Midwest, targeting Russian Strategic Rocket Forces facilities like the Kozulsk missile field. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers penetrate Russian air defenses, delivering B-83 thermonuclear bombs to command centers and missile launch facilities. The U.S. employs a flexible response doctrine, enabling a proportional and targeted reaction. Number 1. Limited counterforce strike. Neutralize key Russian missile sites, such as the Votkinsk plant, or mobile Topol-M ICBMs, while avoiding population centers. Number 2. Regional tactical strike. A low-yield W-76-2 warhead launched from a Trident missile targets a military base in Kaliningrad, deterring further aggression. Number 3. Full-scale counterforce strike. A comprehensive attack disables Russia's nuclear infrastructure, including command bunkers like the Kozvinsky Mountain Complex and submarine bases at Gadjevo. In the event of a nuclear attack, the U.S. would retaliate with devastating force through the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. This means that even if a portion of the U.S. is destroyed, the enemy would face total annihilation in return. The U.S. arsenal of ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles or SLBMs, and nuclear-capable bombers would ensure that no adversary could survive an all-out nuclear war. Missile defense systems can intercept some missiles, but they can never guarantee 100% protection. The real deterrence lies in the U.S. retaliatory capability, which is designed to deliver devastating punishment to any nation that dares to launch a nuclear strike. As technology evolves, the cat-and-mouse game of missile defense and attack will continue. The U.S. must remain vigilant and invest in next-generation systems that can counter advanced threats like Russia's Satan II and North Korea's Hwasong-17. While defense systems can certainly intercept many missiles, the only surefire way to guarantee national survival is through a credible deterrent strategy, ensuring that any nation thinking of launching a nuclear attack on the U.S. will face an inevitable and catastrophic retaliation. The B-83 nuclear bomb stands as one of the most formidable weapons in the United States strategic arsenal, epitomizing the destructive potential of modern warfare. Designed during the height of the Cold War, it remains a crucial element of the U.S. deterrent strategy. Weighing an imposing 2,400 pounds or 1,100 kilograms and measuring 12 feet or 3.7 meters in length with an 18-inch or 46-centimeter diameter, its sheer size is comparable to a compact car. The B-83 is specifically engineered for strategic strikes against hardened targets, including deeply buried underground bunkers. This capability makes it essential for neutralizing enemy command centers and critical infrastructure. Its explosive yield of 1.2 megatons of TNT, or 1,200 kilotons, is sufficient to annihilate entire cities. To provide perspective, it is 80 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. The exact number of B-83 bombs in the U.S. arsenal is not publicly disclosed, as this is classified information. However, estimates based on public reports and declassified materials suggest that the U.S. has around 650 B-83 bombs in its stockpile. This bomb is typically delivered by advanced U.S. aircraft, including the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber and the B-52 Stratofortress, ensuring it can penetrate heavily defended airspace. Upon deployment, the B-83 uses a parachute-assisted delivery system, slowing its descent to optimize detonation at a precise altitude or underground depth, depending on the mission's objectives. If detonated as an airburst over a major metropolitan area like Beijing, the destruction would be apocalyptic. The fireball alone would cover 4 square kilometers or 1.5 square miles, vaporizing everything in its radius. The shockwave would level structures up to 7.5 kilometers or 4.6 miles away, while thermal radiation would cause third-degree burns to individuals within a 13-kilometer or 8-mile radius. The human toll is staggering, an estimated 1.5 million fatalities, with an additional 3 million injured. Minuteman III. The Minuteman III Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, or ICBM, is a cornerstone of the U.S. nuclear triad, offering a dependable and highly accurate land-based nuclear deterrent. Standing 59 feet or 18 meters tall and weighing 36,030 kilograms or 79,432 pounds, this missile is an engineering marvel designed for rapid deployment and devastating precision. The Minuteman III is capable of carrying up to 3 MIRVs, multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, each with a yield of 300 to 475 kilotons. Its range of 13,000 kilometers or 8,100 miles enables it to strike virtually any target on Earth. Launched from hardened underground silos located across the U.S., the Minuteman III is designed to survive a first strike and deliver a rapid counterattack. As of recent reports, the United States has approximately 400 active Minuteman III ICBMs in its arsenal. Imagine a scenario where a single Minuteman III ICBM targets Shanghai, a sprawling metropolis with a population exceeding 24 million. Equipped with a 475 kiloton warhead, the missile's impact would cause catastrophic damage. The fireball would engulf an area of approximately 5 square kilometers, or 1.9 square miles, vaporizing everything in its immediate vicinity.
Crunch tacos! 6 tacos for $6. Crunch, crunch, crunch.
City's central districts. Thermal radiation would result in third-degree burns up to a radius of 10 kilometers, or 6.2 miles, inflicting severe injuries on millions. In this hypothetical attack, fatalities could exceed 1.2 million, with an additional 2.5 million people injured. Trident II missile, the submarine-launched powerhouse. Operating beneath the ocean's depths, the Trident II D5 missile serves as the backbone of US and UK nuclear deterrent strategies, ensuring a survivable second strike capability. This ICBM is a feat of engineering, measuring 44 feet or 13.5 meters in length and weighing 59,000 kilograms or 130,000 pounds. Its range of over 12,000 kilometers or 7,500 miles allows it to strike targets across continents with pinpoint accuracy. The Trident II's defining feature is its ability to carry multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles or MIRVs. Each missile can be equipped with up to 8 W-88 warheads, each delivering a 475 kiloton yield. This means a single missile can obliterate multiple cities or critical military installations in one strike. Deployed aboard Ohio-class submarines, each vessel carries up to 20 Trident II missiles, collectively capable of deploying 2,240 warheads, making it one of the most formidable assets in modern warfare. Ohio-class submarine stealth capabilities and endurance ensure these missiles remain a persistent threat. Operating silently for months at a time, these vessels are nearly impossible to detect, ensuring the Trident II system's viability even in a first-strike scenario. There are roughly 336 Trident II D5 missiles deployed in the U.S. arsenal across these submarines. Consider a scenario where a single Trident II D5 missile, armed with its maximum payload of 8 W-88 warheads, targets a region like Tokyo, one of the world's largest metropolitan areas, with a population of over 37 million. Each warhead has a yield of 475 kilotons, allowing for precision strikes on multiple key locations within the region. If all 8 warheads were deployed over Tokyo and its surrounding areas, the fireball from each warhead would cover approximately 3.5 square kilometers, or 1.3 square miles, incinerating densely populated zones. The blast wave from each detonation would destroy buildings up to 5.5 kilometers, or 3.4 miles away, creating a cascading effect of structural collapses across the city. Thermal radiation would cause severe burns and fires within an 8-kilometer or 5-mile radius for each warhead. In total, this multi-target strike could devastate 28 square kilometers or 10.8 square miles per warhead, with overlapping areas amplifying destruction across Tokyo. Casualties could reach 3 million fatalities and 5 million injuries, with infrastructure decimated and chaos spreading throughout the country. China's DF-5 ICBM, a strategic colossus. The Dongfeng 5 or DF-5 intercontinental ballistic missile is a cornerstone of China's nuclear arsenal. Towering at over 106 feet or 32.5 meters and weighing a massive 183 tons, it is among the largest land-based ICBMs ever constructed. Its range of 15,000 kilometers or 9,300 miles places virtually the entire globe within its reach, enabling strikes on targets across the United States, Europe, and Asia. Capable of carrying up to 12 MIRVs, each with a 1 megaton yield, the DF-5 can unleash unparalleled destruction. China is believed to have approximately 20 to 30 DF-5 ICBMs in its arsenal. In a hypothetical scenario where a DF-5 targets Washington, D.C., the combined power of its 12 megaton payload would cause a disaster of unprecedented magnitude. The fireball would obliterate the city center, while the blast wave would extend destruction over a 35-kilometer or 22-mile radius. Casualty estimates surpass 1.5 million fatalities, with millions more injured and displaced. Russia's next-generation ICBM, the RS-28 Sarmat, also known as Satan II, represents a quantum leap in nuclear weaponry. This 3-stage liquid-fueled missile weighs an astonishing 208 tons and can deliver 10 heavy MIRVs or 15 lighter warheads, all independently targetable. Boasting a range exceeding 18,000 kilometers or 11,000 miles, the RS-28 can reach any target on Earth, employing polar trajectories to bypass traditional missile defense systems. Its use of the Fractional Orbital Bombardment System, or FOBS, allows it to briefly enter orbit before re-entering the atmosphere, further complicating interception. As of recent reports, Russia has begun deploying the RS-28 Sarmat in small numbers, with estimates indicating around 10 to 20 RS-28 Sarmat missiles in service or planned for deployment in the next few years. Reports suggest the RS-28 could carry a 50-megaton payload, rivaling the infamous Tsar Bomba, the most powerful nuclear device ever detonated. If a Sarmat were to target New York City with such a payload, the devastation would be incomprehensible. The fireball would span 83 square kilometers or 32 square miles, while thermal radiation would inflict third-degree burns within a 60-kilometer or 37-mile radius. Fatalities could exceed 7 million, with millions more displaced and injured. In total, if multiple weapons from these systems were deployed across different regions in a nuclear conflict, global fatalities could easily exceed 100 million. The devastating aftermath would not only be measured in immediate loss of life, but in long-term environmental destruction, climate disruption, and economic collapse, and the breakdown of social and political systems worldwide. The use of nuclear weapons would result in no true winners, only untold suffering, irreversible damage, and a legacy of despair. The reality of nuclear war is that it threatens the very survival of human civilization, making the global effort for disarmament and strategic deterrence critical to preserving peace. The devastating potential of these weapons underscores the necessity of diplomatic solutions and the need for continued dialogue to ensure that such catastrophic scenarios remain nothing more than grim, hypothetical examples, rather than a terrible reality. Russia maintains the most formidable nuclear arsenal on Earth, a core element of its strategic doctrine and global power status. With over 5,800 nuclear warheads and a complete nuclear triad, Moscow holds the capability to inflict catastrophic damage anywhere on the planet. But in a hypothetical all-out war, where the United States and its allies are forced to completely destroy Russia's nuclear forces, modern technology, superior intelligence, and military might make that objective theoretically achievable, though with immense risk. Russia's nuclear triad is composed of land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or SLBMs, and long-range bombers armed with nuclear cruise missiles. The land-based component includes silo-based systems such as the RS-28 Sarmat, and mobile ICBMs like the Topol-M and RS-24 Yars. These are deployed across known missile fields in regions such as Kozelsk, Tautashevo, and Dombarovsky. The sea-based deterrent consists of Bore-class ballistic missile submarines, each carrying up to 16 RSM-56 Bulava SLBMs. These submarines patrol the Arctic, Pacific, and Barents Sea, operating from bastions near bases like Gadzhievo and Vilyuchinsk. The air-based leg involves Tu-95MS and Tu-160 strategic bombers, which can launch Kh-102 nuclear cruise missiles from deep within Russian airspace. With around 1,600 warheads ready to launch and thousands more in reserve or storage, this threat is immense, but not indestructible. Destroying Russia's nuclear arsenal would require a devastating first strike, designed to eliminate key components of the triad before they could be activated. The most accessible and vulnerable targets are the fixed ICBM silos. These can be struck by submarine-launched Trident II D5 missiles, each equipped with multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, or MIRVs, capable of hitting multiple silos in a single volley. U.S. Air Force stealth bombers like the B-2 or the upcoming B-21 Raider could penetrate Russian airspace and drop GBU-57AB massive ordnance penetrator bombs, powerful enough to destroy deeply buried missile bunkers. Mobile launchers, such as the Yars and Topol-M, present a greater challenge due to their mobility, but satellite and drone surveillance make them trackable. Once located, they could be destroyed using hypersonic missiles such as the AGM-138A Arrow, or tactical nuclear strikes delivered by stealth fighters such as the F-35 or the F-15EX. Russia's long-range bombers, including the Tu-160 Blackjack and Tu-95MS Bear, are critical to its nuclear delivery capability. These bombers are capable of launching long-range cruise missiles like the Kh-102 from deep within Russian airspace, making them a vital part of the Kremlin's second strike doctrine. However, they're also highly vulnerable while parked on the ground. Recent events have already demonstrated that even heavily guarded air bases are not immune. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces carried out successful sabotage missions deep inside Russian territory, destroying multiple strategic bombers parked at Engels and Solsky air bases. These operations used an ingenious method. FPV, or first-person view kamikaze drones, disassembled and smuggled inside truck trailers, were secretly assembled near the target area. The trailers themselves acted as mobile launch pads, allowing the drones to strike their targets from close range while avoiding radar detection. These attacks showcase that even Russia's most prized nuclear delivery platforms could be taken out with low cost.
War Thunder hits you like the ninth wave with long-awaited new vehicles and graphics upgrades. Now, the world's most popular military online action game is even more thrilling and multifaceted.
Using long-range cruise missiles like the AGM-158 JASSM-ER, stealth bombers, and covert drone assaults. Runways, fuel depots, aircraft shelters, and command infrastructure would be systematically destroyed. Western stealth fighters, such as the F-22 and F-35, would ensure air superiority, intercepting any bombers that managed to take off before they reach cruise missile launch range. The destruction of the strategic bomber fleet, already shown to be possible by unconventional means, would eliminate 1/3 of the Russian nuclear triad in the first hours of war. Russia's nuclear submarines are the most survivable leg of its triad. Boré-class SSBNs, each capable of launching dozens of SLBMs, operate beneath Arctic ice or in bastion zones guarded by the Russian Navy. But the U.S. Navy's advanced anti-submarine warfare capabilities are designed for exactly this challenge. Attack submarines, like the Seawolf class and the Virginia class, would shadow and intercept Russian SSBNs at sea. Maritime patrol aircraft, such as the P-8A Poseidon, equipped with sonobuoys and torpedoes, would blanket strategic zones near Russian naval bases. Pre-positioned underwater drones and undersea sensor networks in key choke points like the GI-UK Gap, Greenland, Iceland, UK, could alert U.S. forces to submarine movement. If coordinated properly, this network could eliminate Russian SSBNs before they ever leave safe waters. Even with a perfect first strike, it's plausible that a handful of Russian missiles or bombers might survive and launch a retaliatory strike. To deal with this, the U.S. relies on layered missile defense systems. The Ground-Based Midcourse Defense, or GMD system, with interceptors stationed in Alaska and California, is designed to destroy ICBMs during their mid-course flight through space. Meanwhile, U.S. Navy Aegis-equipped destroyers armed with SM-3 interceptors patrol the oceans, ready to shoot down ballistic threats. THAAD, or Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, and Patriot PAC-3 systems protect key cities and bases from terminal phase threats. Though not impenetrable, these systems offer an effective shield against limited nuclear retaliation, especially after most of the Russian arsenal has already been destroyed. A final phase of this campaign would involve removing the individuals and infrastructure that give the nuclear arsenal its power: Russia's leadership. The President, Minister of Defense, General Staff, and key strategic force commanders are essential to the authorization and execution of any nuclear launch. Cruise missile strikes could target government bunkers in and around the Kremlin. Advanced intelligence assets would locate mobile command centers or secure shelters. Special operations forces, coordinated with airstrikes and cyber disruption, could physically eliminate or isolate the decision makers, preventing any remaining launch orders from being issued. Without leadership, communications, or access to launch codes, the remaining fragments of the Russian nuclear arsenal would become inert. Civilization looks stable. Planes fly on schedule, markets open daily. Electricity flows at the flick of a switch. But all this depends on interconnected systems: energy, food, transport, communication. Destroy just a few nodes, and the entire structure begins to crumble. Now add nuclear weapons to that equation. With enough firepower to incinerate cities, poison the atmosphere, and block out the sun, nuclear arms don't need to destroy every target to end civilization. They just need to cause enough disruption that the rest unravels on its own. So the real question is, how many nuclear warheads would it take to tip humanity into collapse? Let's start small, one warhead. Take the W-88 thermonuclear warhead, commonly deployed on U.S. Trident II D5 submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or SLBMs. With a yield of 475 kilotons, it's roughly 32 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. When detonated over a major city, a single W-88 can vaporize everything within a 1.5-kilometer radius. Now, consider that a single Ohio-class SSBN, or nuclear submarine, can carry up to 20 Trident II missiles, each armed with up to 8 independently targetable reentry vehicles, or MIRVs, or warheads. That's up to 160 warheads from one submarine, each capable of striking a separate target. One submarine, 100 cities gone, civilization crippled. And the US has 14 of these strategic missile subs. Russia fields Bore-class and Delta-IV-class SSBNs carrying R-29 RMU Sineva or RSM-56 Bulava missiles, each with up to 6 MIRVs and yields between 100 to 900 kilotons. Already, we're well past the number needed to end modern life. The terrifying thing is that these weapons weren't built to win wars. They were built to prevent them, through the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. Here's how it works. You launch nukes at me. Before they even land, I detect and launch my own. We both die, no winners, only ruin. To make MAD work, each side must always have enough survivable second strike capability. That means ICBMs in hardened silos, like the US Minuteman III, with 475 to 1,200 kiloton yields. SLBMs aboard stealthy submarines, like the Bulava or Trident II. And air-launched cruise missiles, or ALCMs, like the US AGM-86B, with W-81 warhead, 150 to 300 kilotons. This triad ensures that even if 90% of your forces are destroyed, you can still retaliate and wipe the enemy out. But here's the dark twist. The very design of nuclear deterrence ensures that if a large-scale exchange starts, no system survives intact. According to numerous studies, including by Princeton's Program on Science and Global Security and Rutgers University, the number of warheads needed to end civilization is not in the thousands. It's between 100 and 300. That's enough to hit the world's top 150 economic and logistical centers. Incinerate major population, tech, and food hubs. Collapse the financial system by destroying cities like New York, London, Frankfurt, and Tokyo. Disrupt global transport and energy supply, and trigger mass famine due to agricultural disruption. Most alarming, just 150 warheads igniting urban firestorms could inject 5 million tons of soot into the stratosphere, reducing sunlight and triggering nuclear winter. Let's talk numbers. U.S. arsenal. W-76-1, 100 kiloton, and W-88, 475 kiloton warheads on Trident II SLBMs. Minuteman III ICBMs, typically 300 to 475 kilotons, W-78 or W-87 warheads. AGM-86 ALCMs, 150 kiloton W-81 warheads on B-52 bombers, and B-61-12 gravity bombs, with a variable yield of 0.3 to 50 kilotons, aircraft-delivered, precision-guided. Russian arsenal. RS-24 Yars ICBMs, MIRV with 4 to 6 warheads up to 500 to 800 kilotons each. RSM-56 Bulava SLBMs, MIRV with 6 warheads, 100 to 150 kilotons each. KH-101 cruise missiles, conventional and nuclear variants. And R-36M2 Satan ICBMs, capable of carrying 10 warheads up to 1 megaton each, even with conservative targeting, assuming 2 warheads per city to ensure redundancy. 200 warheads could obliterate 100 major cities across North America, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. The result? Collapse of global civilization through infrastructure annihilation, governance failure, climate disruption, and famine. 150 to 200 detonations over cities release enough soot to block 10 to 20% of sunlight globally. Global temperatures could drop by 3 to 8 degrees Celsius for up to a decade. Crops like wheat, rice, and corn would fail worldwide due to shortened growing seasons and colder weather. Over 2 billion people could face starvation, primarily in developing countries, but also in industrialized nations. That means a regional war, say India and Pakistan exchanging 100 warheads, could kill more people globally than the immediate blasts. Despite decades of arms control, there are still around 12,500 nuclear warheads globally. Russia has about 5,900. The United States has about 5,200. China has about 500 and rapidly expanding. France has around 290, the United Kingdom around 225, and India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea around 600 combined. But again, it only takes a tiny fraction of these to collapse the world system. Just 3 to 5%, about 300 to 400 warheads, could effectively end modern civilization. It's not the number of warheads that matters, it's the illusion of control. We've built tools that can erase history, and trusted them to flawed systems, unstable politics, and aging infrastructure. The number of warheads needed to end civilization? Somewhere between 100 and 300. The number we have? 12,500. The number that could be launched due to a miscalculation? 1. And that would be enough to end it all. Nuclear submarines are some of the most lethal vessels in the world. When it seems so risky to have miniature nuclear reactors and earth-shattering weapons on board, why would you want them? Well, because they offer massive advantages when stalking an avoiding enemy, and we're going to take a closer look at what these are. Firstly, let's look at what a nuclear submarine is. The U.S. Navy's latest sub is the Virginia-class submarine. This is manufactured by American aerospace and defense company General Dynamics. It's gone through several iterations, but is typically powered by
When we grew up, we're the main characters of the story.
All 3 of my kids have autism, robotics.
officers and 117 enlisted personnel. The purpose of the subs is for anti-submarine warfare and intelligence-gathering missions. The Virginia class is powered by a 210-megawatt pressurized water nuclear reactor, which is itself powered by enriched uranium fuel. The subs are powered by these onboard reactors and produce energy by splitting atoms to create heat. This is then used to make steam for turbines that generate electricity to power the movement of the vessel and keep all the internal systems working. To create this all-important steam, the sub pulls in seawater and purifies it using a desalination process. A side effect of this clean water is that it's also used for drinking, the creation of oxygen through hydrolysis, and for scrubbing CO2 and other contaminants out of the air. Diesel-powered subs at first appear to have an advantage over nuclear as they are smaller and run more quietly. This means they can easily slip into shallow waters along coasts or in river estuaries where they are harder to detect. But diesel engines require oxygen for combustion and produce exhaust gases, including carbon dioxide, which needs to be released through a process called snorting. Oxygen generators can assist by producing oxygen from water through electrolysis, but crucially, non-nuclear submarines still need to surface to replenish their oxygen supplies for both the crew and engines. The subs also use diesel generators to charge batteries, which then use the electricity stored in them to run a motor. Just with any battery, however, they go flat. To recharge, they need to surface and do something called snorkeling, bringing in air to run generators. This makes them vulnerable as they can be spotted from the sky or by submarine hunting ships. However, one of the biggest advantages of nuclear is that the reactor does not have to be refueled over its 30-year lifespan. This means the nuclear sub doesn't need to come up for air in the same way. The only thing that holds it back is the needs of the crew and running out of fuel. A sub that can be at depths for longer is one that can remain out of enemy sight for longer and can also dive deeper into enemy territory without planting the surface. Another big advantage is speed. Current diesel submarines are also limited to slow speeds of 20 knots or around 37 kilometers per hour. With the introduction of nuclear power, previously slow subs were now capable of sustaining speeds of 30 knots or 56 kilometers per hour, along with more time submerged. These extra speeds meant that nuclear subs were now much better suited to outmaneuvering potential threats, including hostile submarines and surface ships tasked with hunting subs. But that's if they get detected at all. A key strategic advantage of nuclear submarines is their ability to survive a first-strike attack. Their stealthy state while submerged gives them a powerful deterrent, discouraging the outbreak of any kind of hostility in the first place. Another stealthy advantage is noise, or lack of it. With fewer moving parts than a diesel model, nuclear submarines can be quieter than their diesel equivalents, which makes them perfect for stealth missions behind enemy lines. The technology has been developed to such a point that in 2009, British and French nuclear subs carrying ballistic missiles accidentally ran into each other in the Atlantic Ocean. As for safety concerns, these are no more greater than a traditional sub. There are no known nuclear reactor meltdowns involving submarines. When things go wrong, it's usually for the reasons any sub can run into trouble, because of water depth and pressure or equipment malfunctions. The nuclear risk is well understood and closely managed by all navies that own a nuclear vessel. The nuclear sub was developed in the Cold War era, when they would often have nuclear missiles on board as a deterrent to warfare. Now, in the post-Cold War era, the weapons may have changed, but the threat to the enemy remains. In fact, that threat to the enemy is arguably greater, as these subs are now equipped with weapons they're more likely to use. They are likelier to be equipped with Tomahawk missiles that have conventional explosive payloads than with nuclear missiles they'll likely never fire. For example, each Ohio-class sub, which is capable of carrying nuclear Trident missiles, can carry 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, 50% more than U.S. guided missile destroyers pack, and almost 4 times what the U.S. Navy's newest attack subs are armed with. Each of these Tomahawks can carry up to a 1,000-pound high-explosive warhead. As we've already explored, a submarine powered by onboard nuclear reactors has a nearly limitless range and superior maneuverability. Add to this the fact that it can be placed in far-flung waters across the globe with no need to surface except for crew provisions every 3 months or so. This means at least 6 international navies, the US, Russia, Great Britain, France, China, and India, all have nuclear submarines in their fleets. A massive benefit of these subs is the ability to launch a hugely destructive missile before the enemy. A nuclear submarine means that it's powered by a nuclear reactor, not because it necessarily has nuclear warheads on board. But if they do have these kinds of weapons on board, they'll be able to launch them faster than their land-based equivalent.
Now that is the show that we have for y'all today. That is episode 2 of the show, y'all. I hope y'all are enjoying the show that we have for y'all.